Morning everybody, how are y'all doing today? I'm doing great because we have some more Microsoft Activision salt to take a look at today. And I guess I could call this video we're taking a look at to be one of the less informed ones that we've taken a look at. Because this guy's whole argument is that, oh, if Microsoft buys Activision, there'll be a monopoly in the gaming space. And hell, even in the title of his video, he says you're insane if you support this. Now look, obviously Microsoft has come under fire in the past, especially in like the 90s, I think, for having monopolistic practices. But when it comes to the gaming space in particular, Microsoft is far from a monopoly. I won't get into that too much right now because we're going to talk about it a little later. But I will say right now, if you take a look at the market shares of the console manufacturers, Microsoft is definitely far from dominant. And it's kind of funny as well because scrolling back through this guy's channel, I can't find any videos of him criticizing Sony for any of their exclusivity practices or anything like that. Which it's just hilarious to me that he's going to criticize Microsoft for buying the company but then keeping some of the games on PlayStation and then adding the games to other subscription services like Nvidia's or adding them to other platforms like Nintendo's consoles. But when Sony pays to keep games off of Xbox and other platforms, no, nothing wrong with that at all. So yeah, anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into this.
I saw a poll online, and this is not one of those things where I saw one person say something and I'm going to outrage farm based upon what one obscure person said. I saw a poll and it said, is this going to be good for consumers? Yes or no? And it was an overwhelming yes vote. Since when was consolidation ever good for consumers? Before we get into talking about all this money, let me show you my new wallet.
Nope, you are not plugging your sponsor over here. Unlike me, thank you to— no, I'm just kidding. But that would be a good setup, wouldn't it? Whatever. Anyway, just, of course he saw the Dreamcast guy poll. Of course that's what it was. We really do live in a small world. But yeah, it was just so funny when Dreamcast guy made this poll because you already know he wanted people to say this is terrible. And that's why he put consolidation in the top slot because he wanted it to seem as bad as possible. But he asked, since when was consolidation good for consumers? Well, I can't speak for other mergers and acquisitions and stuff, but for this I can comfortably say it is. More people will have access to Activision games after this goes through, and the acquisition has already benefited people and it hasn't even gone through yet. At Microsoft's request, Activision went back to the old Call of Duties and fixed their servers, at least on the Xbox. I'm not sure about PC and PlayStation, I think we might be still waiting for that, but at least on Xbox, all the old games are fixed. If you want to go play like World at War or the original Modern Warfare, maybe Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 2, whatever, any of those old games, you can play those on Xbox now. This hasn't even gone through and it's already providing benefits to consumers. But anyway, I'm gonna skip past this sponsor plug. Let's go ahead and get into the actual video.
But first off, I want to show you where some of this is coming from. It's not just the console wars of nonsense. It's not just a bunch of fans of Microsoft Xbox just being like, yeah, eat it, suck it, PlayStation fans. A lot of it starts with this message that we're hearing, and I'll play it right now. Well, let's continue this narrative.
Good news, I think, is starting to prevail that ultimately, if it's good for the consumer, the government can't just block everything. And right now, the government's been in a block everything. And as we've said repeatedly, in many of these...
So did you hear what he said there? If it's good for the consumer. And when I first heard that, I was like, oh, he's going to argue that it's bad for the consumer because he's saying if, but let's keep going.
These examples, these deals are actually good for consumers. They're good for pricing. They're good for choice.
The dead eyes of one who defends corporations. Jesus Christ. It's not like this guy is just defending Microsoft because he feels like it. There are actual positives to this deal. People wouldn't defend this deal if it was bad for consumers. Unless, of course, they were fanboys. But yeah, he's absolutely right. This deal is good for choice. Microsoft is going to keep the games on PlayStation, or at least the future Call of Duty games for the next 10 years. And then they're going to add Call of Duty to Game Pass, which includes cloud gaming, Nvidia's subscription service, and Nintendo consoles. And just a fun fact, Call of Duty did actually used to be on Nintendo consoles, but that was back when they were easier to run. Obviously now Nintendo's hardware just can't keep up with that. But yeah, the last time a Call of Duty game was on a Nintendo console was 10 years ago with the Wii U. It was Call of Duty Ghosts. Actually, excuse me, it was closer to 12 years ago. But anyway, let's continue on into the monopoly claims.
And
they're good for pricing. They're good for choice. Having one corporate overlord own everything is good for pricing and good for choice. You know, back in the day, our government used to break up monopolies by saying it's bad for consumers, it's bad for the market, we don't want to have just one company that controls everything. But now a lot of these companies have been going to the lawmakers and saying, listen, this whole, like anti-monopoly thing, that wasn't to try to stop the corporations from becoming too big. That was mainly to protect the people.
Well, I mean, it's both at the same time, really. You stop the corporations from being too big, and therefore that protects the people. But this is not a monopoly in any means. Sure, you can argue that, like, other parts of Microsoft are a monopoly with, like, their computers or whatever, fine. I'm not here to argue against that, but I am going to argue against the idea that they're a monopoly in gaming. And the way this dude puts it is just so disingenuous. He's like, oh yeah, having this one corporation own everything. Like, this isn't going to give Microsoft everything. It's not like Microsoft is trying to buy all of gaming with this one purchase. This is one big publisher. And look, I'm not saying that this is true, but if you were gonna claim that any of the companies in gaming were a monopoly, you would probably want to say that Sony is. Why is that? Well, let's look at some actual numbers. This pie chart shows the market share of each of the console manufacturers, or at least as it was in 2021. This was after Microsoft had already acquired Bethesda. As you can see, Sony has 43, Nintendo has 37, and Microsoft has 20. Now, this chart is what it's projected to be in 2026, 3 years from now. Even if Microsoft does buy Activision, the split will still go 39, 34, 27. Microsoft is nowhere near close to owning all of the gaming industry, and they never will get that close. Something tells me this acquisition might be their last, at least very big one. Who knows, maybe they could do some smaller ones or something, but something tells me they won't be doing any other really big ones after this. So yeah, I just think it's kind of disingenuous to say, oh, having one corporate overlord control everything, when in reality, even after this goes through over the next 3 years, Microsoft is predicted to still have the smallest share in the console market. And yet somehow having Sony being able to buy out all these third-party exclusivity deals, that's not a problem. But when Microsoft wants to make a company their own and then keep putting the games on other platforms, that's an issue.
And we believe that it's better for the people if there's less competition, because one giant mega company can come in and control the entire supply chain, and we can lower the prices for them, and we can take better care of them, and it's more convenient because now instead of having to go through multiple different companies and go to one store to get your cheese and go to a different store to get your vegetables, we can go to one store and buy everything, and it's cheaper and easier for the consumers. So we believe that monopoly laws were designed to protect consumers from having to deal with nonsense. And since everything under one roof is good, we can essentially make the world a better place. That's kind of what they're saying. We hear that narrative from him.
No, nobody is saying that everything under one company is good. People are saying that this acquisition is good because Microsoft has promised to not take away Call of Duty from other platforms, and in fact has made an effort to put it on even more platforms and make it more accessible via Game Pass. I don't think anybody wants all of gaming under one roof. I think, and this is kind of going back to your analogy about the stores, it would be better if everything was available under every store, but then maybe the store who owns the game, like Microsoft owning Activision, they'll have their own benefits, like, oh yeah, if you play on Xbox, you can get it on Game Pass and then you don't have to pay $70. Or like if PlayStation put their games on Xbox as well, it's like, oh yeah, you can get it on Xbox, but obviously you can't get like full DualSense support, so you're going to be missing out on that if you play it on there. I mean, that's how I think it should work, honestly. If these console manufacturers are going to buy companies, then they should be required to keep the games multi-plat, and then they'll have to come up with their own way to incentivize people to come to their platform instead, besides just locking it down. That's just how I see it anyway.
The judge who rejected this. All right, so here they're all like talking about protecting consumers by allowing massive monopolies and mergers. She says, it's not the harm to Sony we care about, it's the harm to the consumers. So and that she blocked the FTC's complaints. This face right here, this is the person who decided that, they should be allowed to merge because it's good for the consumers. So it's good for the consumers that Microsoft is going to have a huge share of the market, massive share of the market, and that they're going to be able to put all that stuff on their console and withhold it from other consoles.
Again, where is this energy for Sony? Sony has the biggest share of the market right now, but I don't see you complaining about that at all. And again, Microsoft already said they're going to keep at least Call of Duty on even more platforms than it's already available on, and they're going to keep it on PlayStation for 10 more years. It's not like they're just taking everything away. If they were, that would be a problem, and then I would be against this deal. And going back to those pie charts from earlier, even in 2026, after this goes through, it's projected that Microsoft will still be in third place in terms of market share, and Sony will still be in first place. And guess what? Do you want to know how Sony got such a big share of the market? That's right, locking down games to only their platform, but not games that they own. They just pay third-party developers to keep the games off of other consoles and PC. Even Spider-Man from 2018, that was a third-party exclusive because yes, they published it, but they did not own Insomniac. Insomniac was still a third-party company. And I mean, hell, even look at the recent Final Fantasy 16. Not only was that developed by a third-party company, it wasn't even published by Sony. But again, I don't hear any complaints from you in that regard.
How is that good for the consumers? Oh, well, they're going to give them a better thing because then they can get all this stuff under one umbrella. They can get all their stuff from Bethesda and its software. And since they've got it all, they'll just lower the prices. Every piece of empirical data shows that when companies like Amazon exist, and once they completely destroy all the mom and pops and all the small competition, they don't lower their prices. That would be insane for them to do. Once there's no other choices for the consumers, they can just raise their prices as high as they want. And that is what they have done.
It's kind of funny that he brings up the point of, oh, well, they can just raise the prices to whatever they want, because that's exactly what Sony did at the start of the 9th generation. And then it ended up working out for them, so Microsoft and Nintendo copied that model, and now their games are $70. Actually, I don't know if Pikmin 4 is $70, but whatever, Tears of the Kingdom was $70. So yes, obviously, if Microsoft were to say, buy Sony, then that would be a monopoly. That would be an issue. This is nowhere near a monopoly. God, I don't really know how to put it. It's like this guy is like thinking too big picture. It's like, yes, Microsoft could become a monopoly in the gaming space if they keep buying studios and publishers, but just with this, with Activision and Bethesda and all the other studios they own, they are nowhere near a monopoly. They still will have the smallest share 3 years from now. At least that's what's predicted. So honestly, I think you're getting a little too worked up over this, dude. I really think you're making it seem worse in your mind than it actually is.
That's why we've seen record inflation. It's not because we're printing gazillions of dollars. That's a small piece of it. The truth is that the companies are just extremely greedy. So inflation is just a measure of how much the price of goods has gone up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and skip this part. I'm not like super into economics or anything. I'm not gonna pretend like I know what I'm talking about with inflation and all that. And this is starting to get a little off topic. So yeah, we're just gonna skip ahead to when he gets back on topic again.
This is all the stuff that Disney has been allowed to acquire. There's all this stuff. And there are so many interesting franchises that Disney has acquired, and they have just kind of disappeared. We don't really hear about them anymore. And that's because they're not billion-dollar franchises. And this is kind of what I want to look at this for companies like Microsoft and Tencent. So those are the two of the biggest companies in the world right now when it comes to the share of the video game industry. But once you get that big, you can start to set different guidelines and completely squash culture. They start shoving everything into this tiny little box that everything has to be made a certain way. The certain formula has to be used, and we have to produce stuff that's going to, hit mass appeal. That leaves out a lot of the fringes. A lot of the counterculture is just completely gone. When one company is allowed to control this much of our culture, it kind of starts to destroy the culture.
I mean, yes, you're right, but Microsoft owns nowhere near this much of gaming. Microsoft will have, what, like 30 studios after the Activision deal goes through? Like that chart you just showed with all the stuff that Sony owns, that's not even comparable. They own so much more stuff than Microsoft does in the gaming sphere. Again, if Microsoft were to gobble up Sony and Nintendo, then we'd have a problem. Then there would actually be no competition. But again, dude, no, Microsoft does not have the biggest share in the gaming space, that would be Sony, at least when we're talking about console manufacturers. Sony has the biggest lead. They have the biggest share, as I showed on the chart earlier, then Nintendo, then Microsoft. And this will likely continue to be the case even after Microsoft buys Activision. Now, has Microsoft abandoned games after they bought studios? Yes, of course. I mean, look at Rare with Banjo-Kazooie. But they're not the only ones who do that. I mean, didn't Guerrilla Games make Killzone? And now they make the Horizon series? I mean, I guess it's just like he's complaining that Microsoft has the potential to like monopolize the gaming space, which that's certainly possible and that shouldn't be allowed. But then he's completely ignoring Sony. The only difference is Sony isn't buying out the studios, they're just paying the studios to keep the games off of Xbox. So they might as well just buy them out at this point. I don't know how great this analogy is going to be, but screw it, I'll go for it. It's kind of like buying a book from a bookstore versus checking out a book from a library and then never returning it and just continuing to pay late fees on it, but you never actually straight up buy the book from the library.
Look at this. This is another thing. Warner Brothers, they're the other thing. Like, you know, you got Disney and you got Warner Brothers, and they own all this, and we've got Multiversus the game, which I guess looks fun. But, I mean, it's a good way to look and just see how ridiculous all this is. You have Superman in the same game as Arya Stark, in the same game as Bugs Bunny, in the same game as Shaggy, in the same game as Batman, in the same game as Tom and Jerry, in the same game as Wonder Woman, in the same game as Adventure Time. Finn the Human. That's what I was looking for. Now, I guess some people think that that's awesome, but it's weird. It's really weird that all of this culture is just kind of slammed together. Okay, I think it's a little gross. Whether the game's fun or not, and all this is make-believe and it's all silly, but I really miss the individual quirkiness that each individual thing has, each individual brand. And this is just me ranting right now. All right.
Well, I mean, it's not like Warner Bros. Is making one giant cinematic universe where all of their properties are secretly linked together. It's not like, oh, Batman is suddenly canon with Scooby-Doo or anything like that. I mean, there have been those crossovers, don't get me wrong. But it's not like, oh, all of this stuff is now in the same universe, it's all connected. Multiverses is just a game that mashes up all the different franchises that Warner Bros. Owns, just like with Super Smash Brothers. I mean, I don't even really know why you made this point. This isn't even like a negative thing. This is just, okay, a companies combining all their properties together into one game. Because guess what? It's fun and it's interesting. I mean, where else can you see Batman fighting the Iron Giant?
I think that's kind of what's going to happen with all this Microsoft stuff. If we get that much under one umbrella, it's going to be bad for culture. And that's the main thing that I really care about. I mean, the money is really important, and I think it will be bad for consumers. It will remove choices from consumers. You'll have to choose one platform over the other to make sure that you get the games that you want.
You mean like how Sony pays for all those games that aren't even theirs to be exclusive to their platform? Like, this is exactly what I mean. Keep that same energy, dude. I haven't seen one video from you complaining about this with Sony at all. And not only that, you haven't brought up Sony once besides when you read that quote from the judge earlier. And also, this will give people more choices because Call of Duty is going to stay on PlayStation, and it's coming to Nvidia's subscription service and Game Pass, which has cloud gaming and Nintendo consoles. That is objectively more choice for people. How does putting a game on more services and platforms take away consumer choice? Like, that's what this whole video has been. It's been him saying stuff but not backing it up. It's like, oh, Microsoft's going to be a monopoly. It's going to take away choice. Okay, but how? Well, yes. Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, we'll have to see what happened. I know the FTC is going to fight this. A very bad precedent because something on this scale, it's huge. And if the FTC loses its appeal, we're going to see so much consolidation so quickly, and it's going to start transferring wealth to the top even faster. Hopefully this will go through. I am making the video before I know what's happening with this, but hopefully the appeal becomes a thing. Hopefully they get a little more focus. But this is not going to be good for you. This is not something that you should be gloating about on social media. This is not a way to like score one against the other console people that you hate so much.
Well, I agree with the second part, but no, this is definitely good for me. I can't wait to not have to pay for COD anymore, and I can just get it on Game Pass instead. I mean, still paying for it, but whatever, you know what I mean. And yeah, this is pretty much good for anybody. I mean, hell, it even worked out with PlayStation to an extent. Although now, instead of getting all of Activision's franchises for 10 more years, they're only getting COD for 10 more years guaranteed. But then again, that was their own doing. So it's a little hard for me to feel bad for them on that one. It just sucks that ultimately, if other Activision games besides COD don't come to PlayStation in the future, it's most likely because PlayStation screwed up and tried to fight this so hard and denied all those deals Microsoft made. But yeah, anyway guys, with that being said, that's gonna do it for this video. There are 2 minutes left, but it's not really worth talking about. And yeah, basically what we learned today is that it's bad that Microsoft is buying Activision because yes. Again, not a whole lot of compelling arguments given. Any argument of a monopoly is complete BS because Microsoft has the smallest share of the console market, and they will continue to have that even after buying Activision. And yeah, with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will catch you all next time.